Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, so you sent over your notes on EU legislative procedures. Lots of detail in there.
hmm
Our job today is basically to make sense of it all for your oral exam prep. Turn that complexity into something you can just, recall instantly.
That's the plan. We're not just listing facts. We want to get into the power dynamics, right?
Yeah.
The OLP, ordinary legislative procedure, how QMV works in the council, those voting numbers,
Yeah, the math part.
and the exceptions too, the special procedures. It's about understanding why the rules are structured this way, not just what they are.
Exactly. And we'll keep it focused on the big three institutions involved in lawmaking: Commission, Council, Parliament.
Commission initiates, council represents states, parliament represents citizens. That's the core triangle.
Okay, let's kick things off. First big question. In the EU today, who actually gets to, propose a new law? Where does it start?
Right. The fundamental answer, the one you need to start with, is the commission. Your notes rightly call it a sort of monopoly on legislative initiative. In most areas, seriously, if the commission doesn't put a proposal on the table,
Nothing happens.
pretty much the legislative train doesn't leave the station.
Wow. So even if, say, all 27 governments agree they need a new climate law, they technically have to wait for the commission.
That's generally how it works, yes.
Yeah.
It sounds like a huge power for an unelected body, and, well, it is.
Why, though? What's the rationale?
The idea is that the commission promotes the general interest of the union. It's meant to be the neutral guardian of the treaties, preventing laws driven purely by one country's agenda.
Okay, makes sense. But you said sort of a monopoly. Are there ways around it?
Yeah, it's not absolute. The parliament, for instance, can formally ask the commission to propose something. They can trigger the commission, essentially nudging them, sometimes quite strongly, to act.
Ah, okay. So initiatives with the commission, but Parliament can push them. That's a key distinction for this exam. So once the commission has launched a proposal, who actually turns it into law? Who are the decision makers?
That brings us to the co-legislators. Today, that's the European Parliament and the Council. They adopt EU law together on an equal footing.
Equal footing, but that wasn't always the case, right? Your notes mention the history.
Not at all. That equality is relatively recent, historically speaking. If you go back to the Treaty of Rome, the Parliament's role was tiny.
Just consultation sometimes.
Often just the right to be heard, yeah.
Yeah.
Very limited input, which, fueled that whole democratic deficit debate for years.
Right. So what was the big change?
The real turning point was the Maastricht Treaty in 1992. It introduced what was then called the co-decision procedure,
Which we now call.
the ordinary legislative procedure, or OLP. Same thing, different name after the Lisbon Treaty. Every treaty since Maastricht has basically strengthened the Parliament's role, giving it real power to amend and even veto laws, just like the Council.
And the OLP itself, how does that joint decision-making actually work? Is it like they just vote yes or no?
Well, it's much more involved. Think negotiation. They go through readings of the proposed text, usually up to 3. If they still can't agree after the second reading,
Then what?
it goes to something called a conciliation committee.
Hmm.
Representatives from both Parliament and Council get locked in a room, basically, to hammer out a compromise text they can both accept.
Okay, so it forces them to find common ground.
Exactly. It forces genuine joint lawmaking.
So the memory tip here: initiative, commission; adoption, Parliament plus Council, the co-legislators working together through the OLP.
Perfect summary.
All right, that framework makes sense. But you mentioned the Council represents 27 governments. Getting them all to agree with Parliament sounds challenging. How does the Council actually vote internally when they're co-legislating? This brings us to QMV, right? Qualified majority voting.
Yep, the infamous QMV. This is probably the most technically detailed part you need to nail down.
Okay, let's break it down.
So QMV is now the standard way the Council votes on most laws under the TFE, the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. It replaced unanimity for a lot of things.
Why the shift away from everyone needing to agree?
Efficiency, mostly. Unanimity with 27 members can lead to gridlock. QMV is part of the community method trying to make decisions possible while still balancing the interests of different states, large and small.
And the Lisbon Treaty gave us the current system, the double threshold.
Correct. Lisbon simplified it. You need to remember 2 key numbers, 55 and 65.
55 and 65, what do they represent?
Okay. Threshold 1. At least 55% of the member states must vote in favor. So with 27 members, that's currently 15 states.
The 55% of states.
Okay.
Got it. And the second threshold?
Threshold 2. population. Those states voting yes, the 55% or more, must also represent at least 65% of the total EU population.
Ah, so it's not just the number of countries, but also how many people they represent.
Precisely. It's a dual legitimacy check. You need a majority of governments, and those governments need to represent a clear majority of the EU's citizens.
Why both? Why not just one or the other?
It prevents potential imbalances. Like, you couldn't have a situation where lots of small states, representing maybe less than half the population, push something through. Or vice versa, a few very large states dictating to everyone else. It forces broader consensus.
Okay, 55% of states, 65% of population. That's the core QMV. But there's a complication, right? Something about 72%. When does that apply?
Yes, the exception. This is a really important detail for exams. The member state threshold jumps from 55% up to 72%.
When?
When the Council is voting on a proposal that did not come from the Commission or the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs.
So if the idea didn't originate from the neutral commission.
Exactly. If it comes from somewhere else, which is rare in legislative matters, the bar for approval gets significantly higher. It basically reinforces how central the Commission's initiative role is supposed to be. Makes it harder to pass things without their initial buy-in.
Okay, that makes sense. It protects the commission's role. Now, what about stopping a law? How does a group of states bluff something under QMV, the blocking minority?
Right, the blocking minority. Key term. To block a proposal, you need at least 4 member states voting against it.
4? That sounds low.
It's the minimum number. But those 4 states also implicitly need to represent enough population to prevent the yes side from reaching the 65% population threshold. Usually, if 4 reasonably sized states, or even just 3 very large ones plus 1 more, oppose something, they can form a bloc.
So the magic number to remember for blocking is 4.
Yes. 4 is the minimum number of states needed to initiate a bloc.
Okay, so QMV recap. 55% states, 65% population, block minimum 4 states. And 72% states needed if it's not a commission proposal.
You got it.
Does QMV apply everywhere now, or are there still areas where everyone has to agree? Unanimity.
No, not everywhere. QMV is the general rule, the default. But unanimity still holds for particularly sensitive areas. Think core national sovereignty issues.
Like
Things like taxation, big chunks of social security policy, admitting new EU members, and very importantly, the Common Foreign and Security Policy, CFSP. That's still largely based on unanimity.
CFSP. Okay, that's a perfect segue. Let's talk about the areas where the standard OLP model, Parliament and Council as equal partners, doesn't quite fit. These special legislative procedures. You mentioned CFSP.
Exactly. CFSP is the prime example of an area where the Council, representing the national governments, is clearly dominant.
And Parliament's role there.
Much more limited.
Yeah.
Often just informed or consulted, sometimes not involved much at all. It's run on a more intergovernmental basis, governments working directly with each other. High-level political agreement matters more than the usual EU legislative process.
Okay, so CFSP, Council leads, Parliament sidelined. What about the budget? That seems like a mix.
It is. It's a bit complicated. For the annual EU budget deciding how money gets spent each year, the Parliament and Council are equal partners. Article 314 of the TFEU confirms that. They have shared power.
Okay, equal on the yearly spending plan.
Right. But when it comes to the bigger picture stuff, the decisions on the EU's own resources, which is basically where the EU gets its money from.
Like taxes or contributions?
Sort of, yeah.
Hey.
And the multi-annual financial frameworks, the MFFs, which set spending ceilings for like 7 years.
The long-term plan.
Right. On those crucial long-term funding decisions, the Parliament is only consulted. The Council really holds the reins there.
Ah, okay. That's a vital difference for the exam. Annual budget, equal power. Long-term funding, Council leads, Parliament consulted.
Precisely.
Okay, one last major check mechanism we need to cover. It's not legislative, but it's Parliament's ultimate political weapon against the Commission. The motion of censure.
Ah, yes. The nuclear option, you could say. It's how the Parliament holds the EU's executive branch accountable.
How does it work? Can just one MEP propose it?
No, it needs some momentum. It has to be proposed by at least 1/10 of all the members of the European Parliament.
Okay, 110th to start it. Then what? Vote immediately.
No, there's a built-in delay. Once proposed, there has to be a reflection period of at least 3 days before the actual vote can happen.
3 days? Why the wait?
There's a couple of purposes. It prevents a snap, perhaps emotional decision. It allows time for debate, for intense political negotiation, media scrutiny.
And for the Commission to potentially react or defend itself.
Exactly. Gives them time to try and address the concerns, maybe even resign before being forced out. It ensures the process is serious.
And the vote itself, is it just a simple majority?
No. The threshold is deliberately very high. It requires a double condition to pass.
Okay, what's the double condition for censure?
First, you need the two-thirds majority of the votes actually cast. So of those MEPs present and voting, two-thirds must say yes.
Two-thirds of votes cast. And the second part?
Second, the two-thirds majority must also represent an absolute majority of all MEPs. So more than half of the total number of seats in Parliament, whether they voted or not.
Wow, okay. So 23 of votes cast, and 12 plus 1 of all MEPs. That's a tough bar to clear.
Extremely tough. Both conditions have to be met at the same time.
And if it does pass, what happens to the commission?
If the motion carries, the entire commission, the whole College of Commissioners must resign, en masse.
The whole team goes. Why not just the problematic commissioner?
Because of the principle of collegiality. The commission is supposed to act as a single unified body. If the Parliament loses confidence, it loses confidence in the entire executive team.
Has it ever actually happened?
Successfully. Virtually never. It's seen as an exceptional instrument, a measure of last resort. Its power lies more in its existence, the ultimate threat, than in its actual use, but it symbolizes Parliament's democratic oversight.
Okay, fantastic. Let's try to quickly tie this all together for a final review moment. Key takeaways for the exam.
Right. First, remember the flow. Commission proposes the initiative.
Then Parliament and Council decide together as co-legislators under the OLP.
Exactly. Second, nail down QMV in the Council. 55% of states representing 65% of the population.
And remember, 4 states minimum needed to block. And the 72% state threshold if the commission didn't propose it.
Perfect. And third, know the main exceptions where power shifts.
Right. Council dominates in foreign policy, CFSP, and long-term EU funding decisions.
But Parliament holds that ultimate political check over the Commission with the motion of censure, even if it's rarely used. High threshold, 23 votes cast, and majority of all MEPs.
Excellent summary.
Now, we've talked about the institutional balance, mainly between Commission, Parliament, and Council. But your notes also mention the European Council, the heads of state and government.
Right. They set the general political directions, but don't formally legislate.
Exactly. So here's a final thought for you to mull over as you revise. If the European Council sets the big strategic political priorities for the Union, how does that high-level political guidance, that momentum, how does it really affect or maybe even constrain the day-to-day legislative work shared between the Parliament and the Council? How does politics shape the formal procedures we've discussed?
Interesting. The link between the big political picture and the legal nitty-gritty, that's a great question to ponder. Okay, that covers the core points from your notes. Hopefully, this deep dive makes things much clearer for your exam.
Fingers crossed. You've got the key elements now.
Absolutely. Best of luck with the preparation. You should feel well equipped now.